The day before we were to leave for the demon meeting, Akaza had informed me that it would most likely be around 3 days' journey before we would arrive. I haven't been surprised by the fact, for the remainder of the next day, in which Akaza insisted training was not necessary. I already grown completely bored out of my mind. There was hardly anything to do inside the cramped house. I set my eyes on the paints, the only source of color in this damn house aside from the demon who owned it. A part of me regretted the purchase, regretting ever informing Akaza about such a previous and sensitive part about me. Painting, drawing, it was all that side of myself that was internally leaning to push down from the very minute my mother introduced me to Japan's master of assassins. I had hours to spare before we had to mark, hours in which I wasn't even sure what Akaza was going to do in his spare time. Knowing him, he was probably off killing whatever man he could find by means of distracting his over-worrying mind. I scanned the color codes vials in the corner of my room, the delicate handcrafted canvases perched up against the plain wall. I didn't want Akaza to worry over what was to come. His pacing and mumbling in the past few days was increased, and my own anxiety over that matter, causing me to rethink what was truly to come forth for the two of us. I wasn't worried about the demons, despite Akaza's consistent lecturing and informant he forced into the distraction of my mind. I began to realize none of that truly matters much to me. Sure, they could kill me without a single breath, but what scared me the most now was Akaza. I could tell from the way he spoke of his comrades that he wasn't entirely fond of them. Each time he informed me of his group of upper ranks, his words had been chipped sharp at that point, almost as if a deep-rooted hatred was the source of it all. I hadn't pushed him about it, but not wanting to cause the demon any more fret than he already had, but still, the question nagging at me, along with the worry that grew along with it. I made my mind over the new supplies. Oh, how I'd love to paint. But after joining the assassins, that creativity and time had been ripped from underneath me and shoved it deep down into a place that I figured would never surface again. Although, in the end, it hardly did much at all, for even on my way to murder, to hunt down my assigned prey from the many clients who hired me, there wasn't a single time in which I did not pause to appreciate the beauty in things, despite forcing myself to disregard the desire to capture these colors, the feeling into the canvas and paper. I reached open to one of the bottles, and it appeared to be a simple oil-based liquid, a shade of indigo in which I had already imagined an array of sceneries I could capture with it. There had been a time before I destined to manual and spice up people. There was where I had no money to paint. My mother was never one to share her earnings on such silly hobbies, as she referred them to. No, my mother kept her profession and wealth to herself, a secret that only I came to know eventually. A thick coat of disgust fell atop of my tongue as I shook the thought away, opening another bottle of paint to observe the smooth texture. There had been a summer, long ago, before my sister had been struck ill, a summer in which she was healthy enough to work, unironically, as a healer, to be able to afford me in a few cans of paint, the simple primary colors, red, blue, and yellow. I'd used every last drop of it in only a week. My eyes stopped until the ivory-colored paint. How I've longed to have such a shade. It had killed me not to have whites. But I still made do. My younger self would never believe this would come to me, a time in which such an array of beauties was laid out before me, ready for the taking. In fact, the young me probably never would have believed I would end up as a murderer either. But the paints before me, I'd never seen anything like it. I was itching to use them, to bring color into my heart that had grown so weak up until now. For there was now someone who made me feel as though perhaps I did deserve to experience this, to create again. I reached out for the paintbrush, twisting it around in my fingers carefully. A smile perked at my lips, a smile that formed simply for the reason that this entire set was laid out before me, a blank canvas that was beginning to make into something beautiful. I tried not to think about Kiyomikyu, my older sister, in which I'd painted so many times before I lost count. I tried not to think of how she would look at me now, the person I'd become. I didn't think of anything at all, except for the tiny shred of humanity that I still kept shoved away. The part of me Akaza had begun to bring forth back once more. And as I began to add color into the blank paper before me, I lost myself in the feeling. The young assassin hadn't even noticed when Akaza had returned, expecting her to be fast asleep or at least prepping herself for their upcoming journey, to say he was surprised to take it in the state of her usual clean room. Akaza could hardly do anything but stare in sight before him, only daring to breathe as he watched her. It felt as though an entire bomb of color had erupted into the tiny confinement of the walls. It seemed to cover everything, the walls themselves incessantly, in which she had painted into directly, discarding the canvases before her completely. It covered her usual kimono, her hands, and even her hair. Judging from what was about before him, Akaza figured she must have been at this for hours now, as she was humming as she worked, though Akaza hardly knew the friction about the music. He could easily pick up the tone of the song that came to her. The sound of it triggered a sort of formality within him. The part of him wondered what was like. It was addicting to watch her like this, he realized. Like so many other parts of this young woman, she was addicting. He had never truly met anyone, demon or human, like the woman in front of him. He still didn't know what to do, what it meant for himself. Why was it that seeing her like this, in such a madless and happy state, made his chest tighten and his throat close up, eyes unable to leave her swaying figure as she dragged her paintbrush across the wall? Akaza had extreme difficulty taking in his eyes off of her. To keep himself from walking over and taking the assassin into his arms, he always found himself wanting to hold her. But who's judging? He also had come to find that he enjoyed it immensely when she touched him, the way her delicate but almost strong and callous hands would trace over his markings, his brow, his cheeks, his exposed chest. It never failed to make him freeze up. Yin turned, swaying as she moved towards the next wall of her bedroom. Her eyes were half-lidded, if only for a second before she jolted, seeing Akaza's form perched against the door to her room. Her face immediately stiffened to something that he figured was embarrassment. "The hell? How long have you been staring there watching me?" she explained, raising her hands to her chest in a defensive way. Akaza raised brows. "I didn't mean to intrude. I simply found it nice to watch you paint." You don't just sneak up on people like that," she said in a hush, avoiding her eyes. Akaza tilted his head at her behavior. It was strange how flustered she became around him sometimes. He didn't really understand it, though. "I only came to check to see if you were ready to leave," the demon said to her. She side-eyed him, her body still turning away. "Of course I'm ready." Akaza took a step into the room with a smile, scanning the wall. Yin fidgeted with her hands alongside him as he did so. "You certainly weren't kidding when you mentioned you loved your art," he said, eyes widening a bit as he viewed the mural she'd put out onto the wall, a scene he recognized instantly. "Yeah, well," she huffed, rushing to clean up some of the supplies thrown about. One has to find some way to entertain themselves when left stranded inside for hours. A pause. Alone. Akaza turned to look at her flustered state, mumbling to herself about privacy and how she never seemed to have any when it came to demons. He chuckled, turning back to the wall. The demon tilted his head to scan it. "You painted the forest?" he thought out loud, the same sense of happiness and heavenly falling over his chest, making it suddenly a lot harder to breathe. The assassin paused, her cleaning straight and standing up. "The clearing from a few days ago?" Akaza said again. She cleared her throat, unable to look at him properly. "I paint things that mean a lot to me," she said. "Times and places that have meaning for me and who I am." Akaza recalled what happened between them in that very clearing. The same grass had captured. It seemed it was for real. The moonlight reflecting onto the specks of dust that floated about. It was stunning, and was exactly as he remembered it. The view of it all just awe-dropping. Somehow, Yin had managed to capture the feeling of the moment as well, as if it were missing just the two of them, entangled in the grass and giving parts of their soul to each other. Akaza's heart surged, becoming all too aware of the pacing beats of his heart within him. Even more so when the assassin took a few steps closer, viewing her work as well. They stood side by side, arms coming to brush his. "It's not just from that day, you know," Yin said, though Akaza couldn't take his eyes off the wall as she spoke. "The forest was something I wanted to paint for quite some time now. If not for this very place, I would not have met you. And despite so, the troubles it had caused me, it will always hold a special place within my heart." Everything within Akaza was burning, a warmth inside him so staggering that he found himself choking on it. He felt Yun's shrug. "I felt it deserved a place inside this house, to be displayed upon the wall." As if she could sense the serious undertone in the air, she huffed, changing her voice. "Though you also damn well need some color inside this bleak house." Akaza shook his head, finding the smile that began itching at his lips. "I thought it was quite lovely on its own, though I suppose you're right. This does make the house a bit nicer." She grinned. "Oh, of course it does. It was begging me to add color from the moment I stepped into this place." Akaza laughed. "I guess I didn't see it until now. Plus, I was never really focused on the house itself," he said, looking towards her with a knowing look that said he had only been focusing on her. Because of him, she was probably the loveliest piece of art in this home. He never saw the need for anything else. She must have sensed his thoughts from the way his gaze landed on her. For Yin straightened, clearing her throat. Akaza had no idea why was so addicting to see her flustered like this. "When do we leave?" she then asked, and Akaza again had to hide a smile at the nervousness around him. Sometimes about it was more thrilling than seeing the fear on a human's gaze. "Right now, actually." She whipped her head to him, eyes wide before she rushed to the window, peeking back the layers to prevent any sunlight from streaming through. Upon seeing the time of night, she straightened. "I thought it was only have been a few hours." Akaza stepped towards her. "Don't fret, love. We have plenty of time before we have to leave." The thought of the meeting with Yin having to be present still ate up at him alive. He hated it more than he would ever have to admit, but for the sake, he tried to swallow that feeling, hiding it behind his glowing gaze and teasing grin. On that note, Akaza didn't simply offer to help collect the assassin's things, reaching down to attempt any cleanup. This is before she hissed and pushed him away, warning him not to touch her stuff. So he waited for her to finish packing, waiting impatiently by the door and watching her move around the room, fixated on her movement. In only about 15 minutes, they were ready to leave, standing at the door and staring at the world beyond, along with the way it seemed to beckon the two of them, with invitation and warning for what is next to come. The next 2 days of traveling reminded me instantly of a long time ago, in which Akaza and I had been in a familiar situation, a time in which I had been blind by so much. I stared at the fire Akaza had lit, scanning the embers that flowed up above my head, dancing in the little wind that allowed them through the forest of the roofed trees. We were close to the outer ring of the forest, in a direction that led to somewhere I didn't believe I'd ever seen before. As we got closer and closer to the edge of the endless forest that was about to lay beyond it, the air itself seemed to change with each passing minute, as if the trees themselves were waiting for what was to come next. And Akaza was definitely aware of the change in the forest's aura, yet still, he never mentioned a thing, keeping his calm, collective manner and honing it to perfection. The fire was an odd call, I thought, especially when we were closer to what I assumed would now be demon-run territory, though I had to remind myself often of Akaza's ranking. Well, since the fact that he could eliminate any threat who would dare approach, I stared at the demon, sitting silently against the log adjusted to my own. His attention was set on the fire, though I knew his other senses was scanning the area, because aware of every sound and movement that would prove anything dangerous, towards me at least. Akaza's words came back to me about how the other demons were aware of his mission with me, a mission that I couldn't bring myself to ask about, one he definitely wouldn't bring up either. It was something that had always laid unspoken between us, ever since the day we bargained with our deal, his training in return for what exactly? That was it that these demons want with me. What is it that their master wanted? Why is it that I was being hunted? Akaza had informed me multiple times as to what this meeting was entitled about, but he never explained why the meeting was to happen, why it was with me. I shifted against the log, the wood digging through my clothes and back into my skin. I looked away from the demon, my gut twisting in an odd way as I thought. It was true that I wasn't scared of what was to come, but what was more was why. The unanswered question I couldn't bring myself to ask Akaza. I should have from the start, but as I grew to learn and care for him, it became so much more harder to voice it, because a part of me sensed that whatever it was, it would change things, not just between me and Akaza, but it would change me, my entire life. And maybe I was truly a coward for fearing change. I had always. Are you all right? Akaza asked, snapping me out of it, his words beginning to melt any concerns. Turning to him, I straightened my back. Just thinking, I said quietly. He still had to be somewhat aware of anything around us, but acting normal was also a part of this act. An act. We had our roles to play in this meeting, to play into the act that Akaza had told me about, the reason he didn't want to bring me along to this meeting. He didn't want to see this side of him. He had finally admitted that to me not long ago. He didn't wish for me to see the part of him that was rumors of demon claimed as they were. About the meeting? Akaza asked. I hummed, shrugging. About my art, actually. I lied, not wanting to believe I was concerned over anything just yet. Akaza tilted his head in the same way I always quite immediate, and silence fell over us for a few moments, time in which I brought my gaze back to the flickering fire before us. I haven't painted like that for years, I said, though I wasn't sure why. I missed the feeling of it so much that I think I forgot everything but that moment, the moment I was capturing on a canvas. I felt the demon's eyes studying me as he tilted his head. Can I ask you something, Yin? I turned to look at him, resting my chin above my knee that were currently pulled up to my chest. What is it? I asked, scanning his eyes in hopes of determining what this would be about. The way he looked at me struck me still. Why is it that you like to paint? I raised my brow at his question. Why I like to paint? He nodded, shifting a bit closer. I hummed, thinking to myself, in any normal scenario, the question would feel too personal, a type of vulnerability that I wouldn't share, not to anyone, but the way he stared at me, with such innocence and curiosity in my eyes, I found myself taking the realization. I wasn't even sure how to answer it. I like art because when I'm painting or drawing, I began looking away from him and up to the trees above. It's like I can forget who I am in a way. I lose myself within myself. I become fully and, empty at once. I can feel human. I finally feel as though I belong in a world in which, art isn't appreciated, even for someone like me. I pause, looking back at him to see his eyes still training on mine. I love art because when I do it, for once, I'm not destroying, I'm creating. A soft smile tugged on my lips as I watched his gaze shoot towards it. I'm no longer an assassin or a killer when I have those brushes and tools on my beck and call, though I suppose that paint is simply another weapon for artists. It was true, in a way. Creativity was probably one of the most dangerous weapons of all, for anyone, sharper and stronger than any blade. I wasn't sure why all of this suddenly was spilling out of me. Even with my doubts about Akaza mere minutes before that had plagued my mind, I couldn't bring myself to lie, to guard his question. He watched me as if he wasn't a demon, as though he was just a mere man learning the depths and ways of my life. He watched as if I was an assassin. He regarded me as something far beyond my title. The breath was knocking from me at the thought. "You're very beautiful, Akaza," I blunted out without thinking, though I practically regretted it soon as the word exited my mouth, and I knew there was no lie in what I had said. It wasn't the way he looked, the power he held. It went beyond that. There was a sense of loyalty within him, seen only in his eyes, a sense of hope and peace that had left me feeling breathless. And, in that moment, the way he gazed at me, nothing in the world could compare to the beauty I found within it. Akaza was frozen for a moment. I didn't think he would respond at first, until he suddenly moved. He was in front of me now, a dangerous and interrogating aura about him that I found to be contagious. He crouched in front of me, scanning my face with slight wide eyes. "Don't say that," he said, his voice low and thick with emotion I couldn't place. "Please, don't say that." It was pain, I realized. Pain and something else that coded his words. I refused to back away from his closeness, forcing myself to ignore the way my body ignited at it. "It's the truth," I said with an equal quiet, barely more than a whisper, and Akaza was truly an aching beauty. I wasn't sure why it had taken me so long to notice, but now that I had, I couldn't think of anything else. He shook his head, golden eyes flickering under the firelight. "Don't. Not with what's to come." I paused. Ask him what's to come." I opened my mouth, but the pain in his voice stopped me from doing so, and then I realized, with such a stinging clearing, that I truly did not want to lose him, and I didn't want to know. If what was to happen in this meeting? I reached a hand to cup Akaza's face, gently holding it against his cheek. He squeezed his eyes shut in response. So close. We were always so close to just making that move. That final move that we didn't dare to make. We cross-lined, the line of intimacy in our harps of desire, in the ways we touched each other. But there was something left, something also left unanswered between us. He leaned forward, placing his forehead against mine, our noses grazing each other. We knew we cared for one another, but how deep that care went was something either of us dared to speak about. It left a void in me, though not knowing, because Akaza was still demon. Despite everything he felt for me, he was a demon who had his obliges, and I was assassin who had my own. We were both trapped in our responsibilities, each locked into our own cages, and even though Akaza had made me feel like I tasted freedom, if only for a moment, the truth was, neither of us were free. As I swallowed my fear at the next thought, the two of us began breathing silently in front of one another. Perhaps there was a reason beyond my safety that Akaza was worried about when it came to the meeting today. Or, well, tomorrow. Maybe he knew that eventually there would be a time to come where he would need to pick up between me and people he served. I felt the urge to kiss him, having his breath mingling with my own, a hair beneath a wave from his lips, his breathing a bit uneven. The assassin of the demons. Despite how much I longed for him, to taste him and feel him, I couldn't bring myself to make that final move. For honesty, couldn't figure out what Akaza chose to make it as if between me or his comrades. If he were to face a decision, what choice would he make? Akaza didn't make that final move either, as if he was thinking the same exact thing, unaware of what he would choose himself. So, neither of us made the move, our pain slightly visible to one another amidst our final night before the meeting. Tomorrow, and everything would change. Too much I knew was true. Good or bad, something was to be altered tomorrow at this meeting.